In 2010, a neuroscientist at Princeton strapped a woman into an fMRI scanner and asked her to tell a story. Nothing special, just a messy high school prom night. But what showed up on the screen made the research team stop talking. Because as she spoke, the listeners' brains, scanned in a separate room, started firing in the exact same pattern. Same regions, same timing. Sometimes the listener's brain even lit up before the storyteller reached the next part, as if it was predicting where the story would go. Hasson, the scientist who ran that experiment, called it neural coupling, and he said something that should bother you. Storytelling is not entertainment. It is a mechanism for transferring brain patterns from one person to another. Now, here's what that means for you. Every time you're at a dinner, a work event, a random conversation at a friend's birthday, every time someone holds a room, makes people laugh, makes people lean in and forget about their phones, they are not doing something magical. They are running a pattern through their brain, and the people around them are syncing to it. That's it. That's the whole trick. And the uncomfortable question is, why can't you do it? Because let's be honest, you've been in that room. You've watched that person. And then you open your mouth and something strange happens. The thought was clear in your head. Vivid. Interesting. But somewhere between your brain and your lips, it turned into oatmeal. Bland. Shapeless. You hear yourself say, yeah, it was like really good. About a movie that genuinely moved you. You say, it was interesting. About a book that kept you up until 3 a.m, and the person across from you nods politely, glances at their phone, and you feel it. That little deflation. That moment where you know, I just lost them. So what's broken? It's not your vocabulary. You know plenty of words. It's not your intelligence. You understood the movie, the book, the idea, probably better than half the people in the room. And it's definitely not confidence, because confidence is a result, not a cause. Confident speakers aren't confident because they were born that way. They're confident because they've done the thing enough times to know it works. The thing that's broken is retrieval. Think about it like this. Your brain has 2 shelves. One is deep in the back. Enormous, dusty, packed with everything you've ever read, watched, experienced. That's your passive storage. The other shelf is right at the front. Small, well-lit, and nearly empty. That's your active shelf. The words and ideas you can grab mid-sentence, under pressure, in real time. When you read a great book, the experience goes straight to the back shelf. When someone asks you about it 2 days later, you reach for the front shelf. And it's bare. So you say, it was really good. Not because you're dumb, because you never practiced pulling that experience forward. This is not a metaphor. Cognitive scientists have studied this exact gap for decades. The research on active recall, the process of deliberately retrieving information instead of passively rereading it, shows something startling. People who practice retrieval retain up to 80 or 90% more than people who just review. And the mechanism is physical. When you force your brain to retrieve, the synaptic connections literally strengthen. The myelin sheaths around those neural pathways thicken. You are building infrastructure. You are paving a road where there was only a dirt trail. And here is the part nobody tells you. This doesn't just apply to studying for exams. It applies to conversation, to storytelling, to the simple act of opening your mouth and making someone feel something. Because conversation is retrieval under pressure. Someone says, "What did you do this weekend?" And your brain has about 2 seconds to reach into the back shelf, grab something, shape it into words, and deliver it before the window closes. If you haven't practiced that movement, that specific grab and deliver motion, you will default to the safest, blandest, most forgettable version of what happened every single time. So here's the question that should be forming in your mind right now. Is there a way to train this? To actually build that front shelf? To make retrieval fast and vivid instead of slow and flat? Yes. And the method is almost embarrassingly simple. So simple that when I tell you, your first reaction will probably be, that can't be it. It's retelling. Not summarizing, not reviewing. Retelling. Out loud, in your own words, from memory, the thing you just consumed. A book, a movie, a podcast episode, a conversation you overheard at a coffee shop. Now, before you roll your eyes, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a school exercise. 4th grade book reports. stand in front of the class and mumble through a summary of Charlotte's Web. And you're right, it does sound like that. But here's what your 4th grade teacher never explained. The reason they made you do it wasn't to test whether you read the book. It was to forge the neural pathway between understanding something and expressing it. They were training retrieval. They were building the bridge between the back shelf and the front shelf. They just didn't know how to frame it. And here's what makes retelling different from every other communication hack you've seen on the internet. Memorizing power phrases doesn't work because scripted lines collapse under the randomness of real conversation. Watching TED Talks doesn't work because passive consumption is the opposite of retrieval. You're loading the back shelf even heavier while the front shelf stays empty. Reading more books without doing anything with them doesn't work for the same reason. You become a warehouse with no delivery trucks. Retelling is the delivery truck. When you read a chapter of a book and then close it and try to tell someone, or even just yourself out loud standing in your kitchen, what happened and why it mattered, you are doing something most people never do. You are forcing your brain to select, sequence, and articulate. 3 operations happening simultaneously under the light pressure of real-time speech. And every time you do it, that pathway gets faster. The words come easier. The details get sharper. The hesitation shrinks. A research team published in the ELS Journal on Interdisciplinary Studies in Humanities found that students who practiced story retelling showed measurable improvement, not just in fluency, but in vocabulary range, grammar accuracy, and even pronunciation. And these weren't drama students or debate kids. These were regular people who simply started pulling content off the back shelf, shaping it, and delivering it out loud. But I want to be clear about something. This is not about becoming a performer. It's not about learning to be loud or dramatic or charismatic in the way Instagram defines it. It's about something much more basic and much more powerful. Becoming someone who can take what's in their head and put it into another person's head, with enough color and texture that they actually feel it. Because that's what Hasson's experiment really proved. The storyteller's brain didn't sync with the listener's brain because the story was perfectly structured or because the vocabulary was impressive. It synced because the storyteller was reliving the experience as she told it. She wasn't reciting, she was re-experiencing. And her brain, in that state of vivid retrieval, created a signal strong enough for another brain to lock onto. That's the goal. Not polished delivery, vivid retrieval. And the difference between the two is everything. A polished speaker can make you nod. A vivid retriever can make you forget you're holding a phone. Think about the last time someone told you a story and you genuinely forgot where you were for a moment. Forgot you were in a noisy restaurant or a boring meeting. Something about the way they talked pulled you in. That wasn't talent. That was a trained retrieval system running at speed, pulling sensory details, emotional beats, specific moments off the back shelf and delivering them in real time, with enough texture to trigger your mirror neurons. You have the same hardware. You have the same back shelf, probably loaded with just as much material. The only difference is that you've never run delivery drills. Until now. Here's what I want you to understand before we go any further. This method takes 20 minutes a day. That's it. Not an hour, not a weekend seminar, 20 minutes of deliberate retelling, which, honestly, is less time than you spend scrolling through content you'll forget by tomorrow. And the research on synaptic strengthening suggests that 2 weeks of consistent retrieval practice is enough to produce noticeable change. Not mastery, change. The kind where you catch yourself mid-sentence and realize, wait, I'm actually saying what I mean. The words are coming. They're coming faster than usual, and they're the right ones. But, and this is important, knowing that retelling works is only half the equation. Because there are 2 ways to retell a story. One makes people check their watch. The other makes them hold their breath. And the difference between the two comes down to one specific skill that most people skip entirely. A skill that turns a flat recap into something that lands in someone's chest and stays there. That's what Chapter 2 is about. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine you just finished reading a novel, say, a thriller. Someone asks you about it. Here's version 1. It was about a detective who investigates a murder in a small town. There are a lot of twists. The ending was surprising. I liked it. Fine, accurate, and completely dead on arrival. The person you're talking to just received information. They did not receive an experience. Their brain stayed in its own lane, politely processing your words the way it processes a weather report. No sync, no coupling. Nothing that makes them want to hear what happens next. Because in that version, nothing is happening right now. Here's version 2 of the exact same book. So there's this detective, and she walks into the crime scene, and the first thing she notices isn't the body. It's the smell. Burned coffee. Because the kettle was still on when it happened. And that detail, that one stupid detail, is what keeps her up at 3 a.m, sitting on the edge of her motel bed, staring at a wall. Because if the kettle was still on, it means the victim wasn't afraid. Whatever happened, she didn't see it coming. And now the detective can't stop thinking, what kind of person can walk into someone's kitchen, wait for them to turn their back, and do that? While the coffee brews? Same book, same information, completely different planet. And here's the thing. The second version isn't longer because it's padded. It's longer because it's doing something the first version refused to do. It's making the listener smell the coffee, feel the motel bed, see the wall at 3 a.m. It's pulling sensory details out of the back shelf and delivering them with enough specificity that the listener's brain starts building its own version of the scene. That's the skill I mentioned at the end of Chapter 1. The one thing that separates a flat retelling from one that makes people lean in. It's called sensory language. And before you think this is some creative writing concept that only matters if you're writing novels, it's not. It's neuroscience. Researchers studying narrative persuasion and communication found that when people hear sensory-rich language, words that evoke sight, sound, touch, smell, taste, their brains activate the same regions they would use if they were actually experiencing those things. You say burned coffee, and the listener's olfactory cortex fires. You say sitting on the edge of the bed, and their motor cortex fires. You're not just telling them a story, you're running a simulation inside their skull. And a brain that's running a simulation is a brain that is locked in. Not because it chose to pay attention, but because it physically can't tell the difference between hearing about an experience and having one. This is why some people hold a room and others lose it before the second sentence. It's not energy, it's not volume, it's resolution. The people who captivate don't speak in higher definition because they have a bigger vocabulary. They speak in higher definition because they've trained themselves to retrieve specific, concrete sensory details instead of abstract summaries. It was scary is a summary. His hands were shaking so hard he couldn't get the key in the lock is a retrieval. One tells the listener what to think, the other lets them feel it for themselves. And human brains, yours, mine, everyone's, trust what they feel infinitely more than what they're told. So now you know the method, retelling. And you know the multiplier, sensory language. The question is, how do you actually do this without it feeling like homework? Here's the system. 20 minutes a day, 14 days. That's the commitment. And I want to be upfront. The first 3 or 4 days will feel rough. You'll stumble, you'll hear yourself defaulting to, it was really good, and it was kind of intense. And you'll want to stop. Don't. That friction is the pathway being built. That awkwardness is your brain doing construction work on a road it has never paved before. Day 1 through 3 start with something short. Not a novel. A single podcast episode. A short article. A 20-minute show. Something you consumed today. Set a timer for 20 minutes. Stand somewhere. Your kitchen, your car, your shower, doesn't matter. And retell it out loud. From memory. No notes, no phone, just you and the empty air. And here's the only rule. No abstractions allowed. You're not allowed to say, it was interesting. You're not allowed to say, it was about leadership. Or, it was a love story. Those are labels. Your job is to kill the labels and replace them with scenes. What happened first? What did the person say? What details stuck with you? And why? You will be terrible at this on day 1. That's the point. You'll pause. You'll forget half of what you consumed. You'll realize, maybe for the first time, just how wide the gap is between understanding something and being able to express it. Good. That realization is the beginning of the change. Day 4 through 7. Increase the source material. Read a few chapters of a book. Watch a film. And now add a second layer. Retell it to someone. Not to the empty kitchen, to a real person. A partner, a roommate, a friend, a child if you have one. Tell them you're doing a 2-week experiment. Call it a challenge, call it a game, call it whatever removes the pressure. And then just tell them what you read. This is where it gets interesting, because a real listener changes the equation. An empty room doesn't react. A person does. They nod, they look confused, they ask, "Wait, what?" And their reactions become real-time feedback on your retrieval clarity. If their eyes glaze, you're being abstract. If they lean in, you're being sensory. Their face is a mirror for your delivery, and you will start adjusting, unconsciously, automatically, within the first session. Now, here's a micro technique that accelerates everything. When you're retelling and you reach a moment that mattered to you, a scene that was tense, funny, sad, beautiful, slow down. Don't rush past it. Ask yourself 3 questions before you speak. What did it look like? What did it sound like? What did it feel like, physically, in the body? And then say those things. Not all of them. 1 or 2. Just enough to pull your listener out of passive reception and into active simulation. He was sad becomes, he sat in the car for 20 minutes after everyone else went inside, just staring at the steering wheel. The food was amazing becomes, the first bite was so salty and warm that I genuinely closed my eyes, right there at the table, like a crazy person. These are not literary flourishes. These are retrieval outputs. You're pulling a specific sensory frame off the back shelf and handing it to someone else's brain. Day 8 through 10, start getting selective. You've been retelling everything, the whole plot, the whole episode. Now, cut. Your job is no longer to summarize. Your job is to find the 3 moments that hit you hardest and retell only those. This is where you learn editorial instinct, the understanding that a great story is not about completeness, it's about density. The moments you choose, the ones that made you feel something, those are the ones that will make your listener feel something. Everything else is connective tissue. Mention it briefly and move on. This is, by the way, exactly how the best conversationalists operate. They don't recount entire weekends. They pick one scene, the taxi driver who said something absurd, the moment the rain started during the outdoor wedding, the look on someone's face when they opened a gift, and they give you that one scene with enough detail that you feel like you were standing next to them. The rest they skip, because they've learned through practice that one vivid moment beats 10 accurate summaries. Day 11 through 14. Add spontaneity. Stop planning what you'll retell. Just go through your day. Read, watch, listen, live. And when someone asks you anything, any version of "what's new?" or "what did you do?" or "read anything good lately?" treat it as a retrieval drill. Grab one moment, one detail, one sensory frame, and deliver it in real time. By this point, something will have shifted. Not everything. You won't be a keynote speaker. You won't suddenly dominate every room you walk into, but you will notice that the words come faster, that the gap between thinking and speaking has narrowed, that when you reach for a description, your brain serves up something specific instead of something generic. You'll catch yourself mid-sentence saying something vivid, something that makes the other person's eyebrows go up, and you'll realize, I didn't plan that. It just came out. That's your passive vocabulary migrating to active. That's retrieval getting faster because the pathway is paved now. That's 2 weeks of 20-minute drills doing what no amount of passive reading or TED Talk watching could ever do. Building the bridge between what you know and what you can say. And here's the part I want to leave you with. The reason this matters is not because being articulate is impressive. Nobody cares about impressive. People care about connection. When you tell someone about a book and they can smell the burned coffee, you haven't demonstrated a skill, you've given them an experience. You've taken a pattern from your brain and transferred it into theirs. Hasson's neural coupling, happening in real time, over dinner, with no scanner and no lab. Just 2 people and a story told well enough that one brain syncs with another. That's the thing people mean when they say someone is magnetic, when they say someone is great to talk to, when they say they could listen to that person for hours. It's not charisma. It's not some inherited gift. It's a retrieval system that's been trained to deliver vivid, sensory-specific output under the gentle pressure of another person's attention. You already have the storage. You already have the material. The only thing you've been missing is the 20-minute daily drill that turns a warehouse into a broadcast tower. 2 weeks, 20 minutes. Start tonight.